It's Radio Skid Row 88.9. What's up, ladies and gentlemen? And as you noticed, I didn't put the theme music on today. There's a reason why, because I've got two guests today, and I want to really squeeze them in and get as much information out of them as possible. Remember that number 95509552. Also check out radioskidrow.org and goodsmoke.com.au. That number is on. I'm going to try to take the phone off so you don't disrupt this interview, so we can have a smooth interview and we don't have ringtones in the background and all that sort of stuff. Also, check out our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and what else do I have? And LinkedIn and stuff like that as well. If you've been following the page, you know today I have a special guest. Been lining this up for 2 weeks now, something like that. This one's a very good subject because this is getting into the heartstrings of things and the little things that we don't really talk about in life. But this lady herself has started something, say 2017, so it's I think the 3rd anniversary this year, and she's starting out. It's Mama Taboo from Taboo Talk. What's up, Amira? How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm trying to get organised. As you know, I'm trying to get all over the place, but we're here now, 6 o'clock, and we made it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, man. I'm excited because this one's a big subject. Let's start off first. I know that people might have searched up Taboo Talk because I put a few promos today, but before we start all that, I want to get into who you are and what type of person you are and how to get to this point at this time. We're going to go for an hour, then we have another guest after that as well. And hopefully if I can break her arm to stay, maybe she'll stay with me. We'll see what happens. Anyway, Amira, so where are you from? And, what school did you go to? And, what's your background so that we know who you are? And then we'll get into the juicy stuff.
Who I am, such a deep question. I think it's actually easier to talk about Taboo Talk than to talk about Mama Taboo. But born and bred in Sydney and
West, East, South.
And the inner west.
Inner west, okay.
Yeah, so I grew up around exactly. So I grew up around these areas in Belfield.
Oh, okay.
Not a very well-known area.
No, I know Belfield.
You know Belfield?
I've got cousins in Belfield.
Yeah?
It's a small little pocket, I know.
Yeah, it's one of those kind of bridging suburbs in between Belmore and Strathfield.
Yeah. No, it's a nice little area. It's not too hectic over there. So
it's definitely not hectic.
Yeah, it's very, very low key. Yeah. Until you get it further west, then it gets to be hectic there. But it's nice.
As soon as you cross the bridge, it gets a little bit more hectic.
I used to go there when I was a little kid to see cousins all the time. So I know it's like there's a park that we used to go play and all that. So it's
2191 represent.
But I'm from the east. Relax. I'm not going to represent.
All right, no representing. Okay. I'm not sure how much Belfield has to do with my identity these days, but so I grew up in Sydney. The first few years of my education, I moved around a lot. I actually attended 4 or 5 different primary schools before my mom settled on one.
Okay.
And so I attended an Islamic school actually for most of my education from grade 3 to 12. Which was also in the southwest.
Shout out southwest.
Shout out.
I'll shout out all the areas here.
All the areas, yeah. That was a big part of, I guess, my adolescence. Obviously played a big role in shaping the person I am today. For better or worse. Yeah,
exactly. Even shaping like big questions of where you're from, who you are, like the concept of God and stuff like that. Because many schools that go to public school, they don't get that sort of third dimension of life. And in like Catholic schools and Islamic schools, you get that essence of like, there's something bigger sort of thing.
I would like to agree with you.
Well, for me anyway, that's my sense.
Yeah, because I mean that's probably the principle.
Yeah. The concept of the school. Yeah. I don't know if it played out for you.
Exactly. Whether the practicality was the same. But it definitely did add a spiritual dimension to my life in those years and growing up and trying to figure out who you are. Sure. But I would say actually those were some of the toughest years of my life. Especially high school was a very, very difficult period, as with most teenagers. Are
you talking about identity, who you are, or just growing up there? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of identity.
Do you have brothers, sisters?
I have 2 brothers and a sister.
Okay, you're the oldest?
I'm the second youngest.
Second youngest, okay.
I'm not even a middle child. I have
no identity.
Just one of them. Yeah. And we all went to the same school at different periods. I'm not sure if they would have the same perception of the school. I can only speak for myself. But it definitely challenged my identity. I'm more of a free-spirited person, as I like to think, and it really challenged me. Those years really made me realize how important belonging is, because I didn't feel like I belonged there at all.
I mean, one thing I noticed about people that like, even for me, were like trying to walk away from the real like fundamentals of religion and trying to understand is bigger than the religious concept, you know, of church or whatever it may be. Like trying to find like, do I really believe in this? And sometimes those type of people don't really run away from something bigger than them. They become either detached from God altogether, or they become spiritual. What happened with you when you found that this is not for me, or this is not the way I want to go about it, but I still believe certain things of the religion?
To be honest, I don't think it was even the religious dimension. I don't think it was that it may have played a role, but I think the feeling of not belonging was on an identity level. I didn't really find that there were people in my school, in my classroom, that had the same kind of interests, that socialized the same way. I felt like
out of place.
I felt out of place. I was the black sheep in my family. At school, I felt like I was always different.
Were you like a troublemaker at school, anything like that? Were you cheeky at school? Because that's what I was like.
What do you think?
And I think yes, 100%. Because
so?
You know why? It's something that like, people draw people that are similar to them.
Okay.
And I think every guest that I've had, I've always been a menace at school, but I think it sparks something to do something more greater than...
You know, I wasn't a menace. I wasn't a troublemaker in a sense of running amok.
Yeah.
I was
cheeky.
I was cheeky.
Yeah.
And
okay.
I was bored.
Okay.
And I used to, every day in class, I would write down the numbers 1 to 100 on my table and then rub them off one at a time, because I was so uninterested. I was so bored. And I would draw fake tattoos on my arm, and I wasn't interested, and surprisingly did pretty well in school.
Oh, really?
I was able to get a pretty decent mark
in high school and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You get your UAI and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What'd you get?
78.
That's better than me. I don't even think I got a UAI.
I think I haven't thought about it for a while. I think it was around that range, and that was coming from a place of just wanting to scrape by. I didn't have some big dreams. I didn't really.
But that's pretty good though. 70. That's above
78,
average.
yeah.
For
the school I went to was not above average. I think the average there was much higher.
Oh, really?
Because it's a selective school.
What's above average for me? Because my average is like 20 or something. No, but at school, I
was content with it.
Yeah, exactly. No, but at school I did a class, art. It was for art, painting and all that sort of stuff, art history, whatever. And I did that to blood, I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
But that ended up being my highest mark, I got I think I got like 68 in it or something. That's my highest mark.
Was your highest?
See that? Let's not talk about the other marks, all right? They weren't in the 60s, but anyway.
At least you got to choose your subjects. Don't get me started on that. But yeah, I think the thing that became really important for me at those years was having a role model.
Oh.
Like finding someone, whether it was a teacher that I could relate to, someone who I could like open up to. And those were the years that I decided what I wanted to be after I left school, not based on having some big career goal, but out of wanting other young people to have what I didn't have.
So was that a pressure for you that you had to find a career goal? Because it was for me going out of school.
To some degree, yeah. To some degree. Not so much. I mean, my siblings are in very different. My sister studied traditional Chinese medicine, so not the typical Arab kind of field that you get pushed into.
Yeah, true.
So we definitely had a lot of freedom, so long as we were doing something.
Yeah. Well, especially in Middle Eastern culture, like they wanted others to be a doctor, lawyer, like
we didn't have that. We didn't have that much pressure. Did you have that in your family?
No.
Yeah.
Okay. My parents are pretty cool like that, but I mean, like the general consensus about Arab families, they want them to be high achievers, which is understandable from the places we come from and stuff like that. But yeah, I can tell that would be that's pretty much different from what you are.
Yeah. So I didn't have that kind of pressure. It came from a place of passion, actually. I really, really like the idea of being there for others. Nice. And I had one friend who was studying social work, and it always sounded so fascinating to me when she would tell me we do role plays in class. It sounded really experiential. It wasn't something I wasn't really into the sit in the class and learn, but it was something that I could
hands-on sort of thing you can experience.
Yeah. And I didn't really understand what it meant at that point, but I looked into it and I was convinced immediately this is the career path for me, and was able to get into social work. So that was great. And my aim was just, I wanted to work with youth. I wanted to help young people accept themselves in the same way that I wasn't able to do as a young person, to be able to, you know, help them feel valued and understood and know that they always had someone to talk to. So
what's your earliest experience of just helping someone, and did that play a part in wanting to help today?
Probably one of my earliest memories wasn't necessarily as, you mean just in my general
life, not just sparking this, but I mean like, because, you know, events in our life sort of domino effect to where we want to go in our life.
For sure.
So is there a time in your life when you were like little even that sparks that, you know what?
That's a really good question.
Thanks for that.
Mostly when I was younger. I wouldn't say that I was necessarily like as a child. I was always the kind and caring one and kind of quiet. I wasn't very outspoken as a child. But one of the earliest memories I have, I remember I was probably 12 or 13 years old, and I was at a library with one of my friends, and I left her there while I went to go to the bathroom or just step away for 5 minutes. And when I returned, there was an older man who was speaking to her. And I could just tell from her body language as soon as I walked in that she was really uncomfortable. And I immediately faced him and basically told him he needs to leave in very direct ways. And I literally felt myself like just burning with just feeling for her how uncomfortable she was and wanting to protect her. So that sense of protection and protecting people close to me has always been there. And for a long time, I never really understood what that was about. And essentially that's what advocacy is. It's about trying to help people be able to stand up for themselves, and sometimes you have to step in and, you know, help them. So I would say as an advocate, in addition to being a social worker, even when I was young in a family home, I always felt like my role was to sometimes step in and correct things, or to just let people know that there was always someone there that had their back.
Would you say you play like a motherly role sort of thing?
Well, my nickname is Mama Taboo. So
for no reason, yeah, okay.
My nickname in Taboo Talk is Mama Taboo, and my nickname back at work was Mumira. Okay. So I would say there's been a consistent motherly theme that's run throughout my life. Yeah.
Where does that stem from? Is that your mother, grandmother? Is that women in your life?
I didn't really have a relationship with my grandmother for long. She passed away when I was still quite young. It could come from my mother. It's just something so innate in me. It's probably one of my highest characteristics, is being very protective.
Do people get annoyed about it though at times?
Annoyed about it?
Or they're frustrated, or maybe like they think it's too full on for them? No,
I've never had any complaints. Usually people are quite...
or you smother them that much that they...
No.
They can't talk.
It's protective against...
Injustice and stuff like that. Yeah, I understand that,
I will say having that characteristic or personality trait in Egypt is very difficult.
It's hard, yeah.
It's very hard.
So there's another segue to your nationality. Thank you for that. So you are Egyptian, right?
I'm Egyptian.
And Egypt's so rich with history and culture and just even concepts of life and philosophy and medicine and all that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, like me and you were born here. My father was born here, and we're talking about how it's been here, and like hearing the stories from our parents, hearing like how good everything is.
Yeah.
But it's a completely different dimension when you go there and smell the place and feel the place and know the people, rub shoulders with people.
Yeah.
Let's go through the journey, like going to, obviously we haven't talked about Taboo Talk, but even just let's talk about your experience at Egypt, like as a person besides Taboo Talk. What was it like for you, even as a woman as well, going there? What was that like?
Yeah. Look, I'd only been to Egypt once as a child. I was 8 years old. We went on a family trip. And I don't really remember much of that trip. I don't even remember the pyramids. I remember things like throwing fireworks off the balcony with my cousins, and fascinated that they had flat roofs, you know, and things like that. As a child, you notice. Okay. And so I was completely disconnected from my culture for a long time. And then in 2017, I went on a trip to Egypt, had an amazing time, got to reconnect with family, got to actually learn who my family consists of. And, you know, as you mentioned, the stories, and there was a big part of me that was missing that I didn't realize until that trip. And then I moved there in 2018 in December and was living there for just over a year.
You go to the pyramids this time?
Did I go? I don't think I did.
No, don't you dancing on it? No, I seen
dancing in the pyramids.
No, you're dancing in front of something when you're in Egypt. Was that a pyramid you're dancing?
That was probably in Turkey.
Oh, okay.
I dance everywhere. Yeah, no, that wasn't. It was in Egypt, but it was in.
You're like belly dancing, sort of trying to anyway. I'm not gonna say it.
I was dancing Afro style, but anyway. No, that was actually in Gabal Musa, which is in St. Catherine region on the Sinai. And I went to the pyramids once, and then it was so hectic getting in. I was like, all right, tick. I've done it. As an adult, I've done it. I've got the photos to prove it.
But was it as big? Like, okay, because I've never seen them, and I've seen them pictures.
Yeah, they're huge.
Like, how huge? Like, give us some, like, if you're in Pitt Street Mall and you're looking at Centrepoint Tower, is it like your neck breaking?
It's not just the height. It's just the size of them, and
the mass of
there's definitely some electromagnetic energy.
Something going on
you
there.
definitely feel.
No, 100%.
They're huge, and you feel teeny tiny being there.
And what questions can you, like, how the hell do they build this stuff?
Oh, let's not get into conspiracy theories.
No, because it's crazy, like how much history is there and it's still standing, which is beautiful, you know what I mean? What is something that you picked up from Egypt that you thought before going, and then it just warped your mind and said, what the hell was I thinking?
Something that, like, you mean really surprised me?
Took you by surprise and say, I didn't know that. What the hell?
Okay, well, I didn't. Okay, this might sound. I hope no Egyptians hear this and get offended by it, but I didn't expect it to be as progressive as it is. Like, I feel I've tapped into spaces, for example, of holistic medicine that I didn't have access to in Sydney, Australia.
Oh, really?
So I was definitely pleasantly surprised that, and the art scene, the visual arts, and it was incredible. Some of the best art that I've seen and experienced, and I'm engaged in a women's circle in Egypt. We have regular events, and there's so many women. There's a lot of expats who live in Egypt, which is another thing that surprised me. And I was living in an area that was predominantly expat, and it always surprised me that so many Westerners were moving to Egypt who are not even Egyptian.
Oh, really? Okay. And to go live there, like
to live there, to work there, to learn Arabic. A lot of people are really interested in it. It's interesting, and sometimes it upsets me as well, because I feel that the Egyptians who live there don't even realize they don't appreciate it, and they don't realize how much value there is. You know, and there's reasons behind that, and I understand it. But then you see a lot of Westerners moving there and can speak Arabic fluently, like better than me.
Yeah, for sure. Even like in Lebanon, the Filipinos, when they at work and stuff and they're serving, and they come up to me and they start speaking Arabic, and I'm like, what? I don't even know what you're saying. It's so good, you know what I mean? So I understand, because I feel like I cheapened myself, not even learning my Arabic 100%, you know what I mean? Like, it's my identity. I hear it like pretty much every day here and there in my family and stuff. But I can understand what you're trying to say. But where did that concept come from? That misconception come from? Was it from the news here? Or?
Look, for sure, it's just the way that the Middle East is, you know, portrayed in media.
And you believed in
that.
And
I guess I bought into it without realizing. My subconscious was obviously affected by it, because, you know, I went there knowing that there's a rich culture, but I just kind of thought it was an outdated culture. And then I was like, oh, wow, there's, you know, and of course, as you move through different villages and different areas, you know, people are living different lifestyles. So you're not going to find that kind of experience where people are doing Tai Chi or, you know, whatever it is.
They still hold on to the heritage there. Like, you know, even the old, like farming and that's still going over there, like deep, you know, and it's, well, where I'm from in Lebanon, it's not really far from the city. So it's like, you still have the cultural heritage around, which is beauty in Egypt as well. Like they haven't knocked them down.
We have the Nile
like
River, you know, so
that's biblical. Like, it's like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Like,
and
you're
then
walking through history all day.
Exactly. And then you go to areas like Aswan, you know, where Nuba, and just seeing the culture that's so rich and colorful, and the music and the language.
Yeah,
you know?
come on. Yeah, that's
learning about the Nubian culture was a big. I was like, I never learned about this. I never, you know.
Yeah, knew even nothing about it. 100%.
No.
I guess it's up to ourselves to go educate ourselves and go search instead of like relying on these like social media things. You know what I mean? Like trying to rely.
It's changing. I really feel like the way that the Middle East and the MENA region and Africa and a lot of these regions that are typically, you know, stereotyped as being barren land and
nothing
desert.
Happening,
you know, I feel like it's changing, it's shifting, because there's a lot of young influencers and travelers.
In inverted commas,
content creators, I should say, and travelers who are visiting these regions and reshaping the way that those stories are being told, because young people are not, you know, going to, most people that I know of anyway, are not going to travel guides and to travel agents. You know, they're going on Instagram. Yeah. And they're like, beauty, and I get so many messages on my Instagram. What's that place that you went to in Egypt? I want to go there. Yeah. So I think it's changing.
That's the beauty though of like that's why I don't find social media all bad. You know, if you use it right, it can be used in the like. Amen. You can help your country through tourism on that. You know what I mean? And getting two people over there, not only by the typical like all right, pyramids, blah blah blah, but you're showing like back streets and people's little homes. You can show all those things without having this.
Just what everyday life looks like. Exactly. I always joke about telling my friends in Egypt, like we need to start a hashtag that's just like another day in Egypt, and it's just people wouldn't believe the things that happen. I get messages like, "Are you sure you're in Egypt? This doesn't look like what I imagined it to be." So. Yeah,
but it's good you've broken those down there. That's the best thing you can do.
You know, unintentionally. I'm just living my life out there, and people are like, "Wow, so
you look good here." No, that's beautiful. Those things are like, even like as I was saying, the next guest, he does the same, like trying to break those barriers down. Yeah. Which gets people talking. Why I think it's beautiful what you're doing too is that you're capturing the youth, and the youth are coming and pushing that old style thinking out, like, you know, like trying to open their arms up to the world and say, come and visit. It's not what everyone's saying it is, you know what I mean? Like anywhere there's trouble, even here there's trouble. Imagine we put our troubles internationally and people go, oh, I'm not going to go to Australia. Like there's shootings, there's killings, there's raping.
I feel very passionate about this topic, and I constantly speak about the fact that I felt safer in Egypt than I do in Australia. My personal experience of living there made me feel so much more at peace than being here.
Even the idea of taking taboo talk there is a big risk, or thinking beforehand taking it there might be a big risk.
That was different.
Let's do that in the second half. I'm gonna play.
Let's come back to that one.
Yeah, we hit 6:30. Believe it or not.
Wow.
Is that fast or not?
Time for it.
I'm gonna play one song so we get another 25 minutes out of it, and we'll go from there. This one's called "The Last Days" by Homebrew, just a little New Zealand group. You know, you guys that I love this song. These guys, so keep playing them. So it's Radio Skid Row, 88.9. You're listening to Good Smoke. It's Radio Skid Row 88.9, and you're tuned in and listening to Good Smoke. What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Remember that number, 95509552. Also, check out radioskidrow.org and goodsmoke.com.au. Also, you can check out Amira and Taboo Talk on Instagram and Facebook, right? You can check out Facebook. And from there, you can hit her up if you want to hit up the talk, because there's a talk tomorrow night, and we'll get into that at the end of the session. Or there isn't a talk?
It's actually been postponed.
Okay. We'll talk about
We'll talk about that.
Just before the break, if you haven't been tuning in, we'll talk about Amira and the things that or how she was brought up, where she's from, and how her experience was in Egypt, and even taking Taboo Talk there. So the one thing that you said before we went to the break was that you felt much more safer in Egypt than you do in Sydney.
Yeah.
How so? And please elaborate.
Look, for me, as a Muslim woman, and previous to last year as a scarfed Muslim woman, It's been a while since I felt safe in Australia. I would say pretty much since around the time of the Link Cafe siege. There was a big backlash on the Muslim community, and Islamophobia just went through the roof. So much so that someone had to create an Islamophobia registry to register the amount of Islamophobic experiences, especially Muslim women were having their headscarves pulled off, being spat at, being called, So these are the kind of things that were happening around that time that on a global scale maybe people were not aware of. But these were the lived experiences of, I never thankfully had an experience to that degree, but there was just a sentiment, and I would say to some degree still is, a sentiment in the air that we're not really welcome here. So being on public transport, being in public spaces, if it was clear that I was Muslim in Australia, I always felt on edge. I always chose my seat on a train or a bus or in a room strategically so that no one could come behind me and harm me. And I constantly had that thought in the back of my mind, and it just felt so unsettling. I never felt like I was just free. And then going to Egypt, to a Muslim country, and I mean, it has its own, don't get me wrong,
challenges,
it has its own challenges and has its own issues. I didn't have to worry about that. I never had to, if anything, there's a community and a cultural sense of looking out for people that I found there a lot more. If someone needs help in the middle of the street, people actually go over and they check in. It's not, they don't have a culture of, every man for themselves. It's very much community
family
driven.
orientated.
It's family orientated. And even if you don't know each other, even if you're complete strangers, people want to connect and help one another.
Yeah, that's right.
And I don't want to paint a picture of Egypt as a perfect place, but I would say one of the biggest positive feelings I had of being there was that I always felt like someone had my back, even if it was an Uber driver or a store person. People were always aware of who's around and
courteous and stuff like that.
Courteous and people go out of their way to help someone else. And I've had a lot of other people speak about the Middle East in general in that way. So I definitely felt safer there. I was not alert at all times. People might think about Egypt, it's obviously not in a very stable political environment, but at the same time, on a level of everyday life,
it's
you're just living your life. Yeah.
You talked about the Lent Siege Cafe and how it affected the Muslim community, but from my perspective, it affected them even if you look Middle Eastern too. The
Sikh community were targeted
exactly,
in a lot of attacks.
It's
anyone who looked different.
And even though man, I've had my neighbors, whatever, I've had the worst with that sort of stuff. And it doesn't bother me because when for me, my mum taught me, when you know who you are and you know your history, you know who, how can anyone laugh at you? You're standing on foundations of
But doesn't it get tiring?
No, not really. I live in a predominantly white and Asian area, so they see my parents there and they're like, what the hell are you doing here? You're not supposed to have a house in this area, you know what I mean? But the thing is, they don't know the history. If they knew the history, if they know who people are, if the people ask questions to each other, I think they'll start to melt down their biases and stuff like that.
For sure.
And living the life instead of complaining about like if I was as young and complaining about this guy's picking on me, but then I realized they weak and they trying to feel strong by putting you down, you know what I mean? And for me, I just having brothers, standing up for myself you were doing when you were young, voicing who I am and not caring what they think is just it's given me a foundation where people give you a sort of respect, sort of thing.
So you think that came from your upbringing?
100%. Because my parents had to fight in their position where they are today. They had to fight literally the council and get what they needed to do to give us a living and give us food on the table and stuff like that. My parents were young, 25 and 20 or 19, whatever, having kids, getting kicked out of the house from his, you know what I mean? It's like that fighting spirit didn't have to be said. It was more shown for life. And I feel like if I'm taking your shots and still walking forward, those people are like, well, we can't get him. And they sort of lay off you sort of thing. And then they give you this sort of, say respect maybe, or they're just, they're not strong enough to go up against you or whatever it may be, but they just melts down their whole perception of what a Middle Eastern person is. I don't care if you're Muslim or Christian. What matters is, are you representing who you are, fully and truly, not just trying to fit a stereotype sort of thing, you know what I mean? But that's my rant for today.
I'm just nodding.
Exactly.
I'm nodding all along. I'm with you 100%.
But that's why I like what you're doing when you took that whole concept of taboo talk to Egypt. And let's talk about that. What even gave you the idea to take it there?
So as I mentioned a bit earlier, I was trained as a social worker. So I worked in my field for over 10 years. And I love working with young people. I've worked with really, really at-risk, disenfranchised youth who are at, and just people in general who are at the most vulnerable stages of their lives. And what happens as a social worker and client relationship is that you get to see, even at this dark stage, even if the person's committed offenses, even if it doesn't matter, they're homeless, they're they're going through substance abuse issues, you see the intention behind, you see their story. You get to understand the nuance of how they got to this point. And I realized most people will never see that because it's a sacred relationship. It's something that you get to experience and you hope that you're able to help them along their journey. And I was hearing stories and stories and stories and stories. And I realized there was so much shame in the stories. Yeah, like most people are not feeling accepted. Most people don't feel like they can be their true selves because they're either doing things, they have behaviors that they need to hide from society. I can talk about that for a long time.
But whatever the
point is, there's shame behind it. So I wanted to start a space that moved people away from shame and actually help us just sit together, face each other, and try as much as possible to be who we are and hold space for that. So I was playing around with, different formats and eventually found something that worked, which is now currently how Taboo Talk works. And there are so many taboos in society.
Yeah, for sure.
So many, like mental health, sexuality, gender roles. We've talked about it all. We've talked about terrorism. We've talked about veganism, which funnily enough is still a taboo. And I think maybe more so like increasingly. And I really see that the online space is not always the best space for these conversations to be.
100%, yeah.
Really, really can help things turn very bad.
For sure.
So it needs to be face to face, in my opinion. When you're face to face, you're as we are.
Yeah, for sure. It's a feel. There's a feel between.
Your faces are connected. Your hearts are connected. I wouldn't dare say something to you face to face that I might be able to quickly say online without thinking about the consequences. And we live in these times. Everyone's using the term polarization. We live in polarized times, and this is where our future is headed in that direction. And so if we're just sitting in our silos and I'm hanging out with my friends and you're hanging out with your friends and we have our kind of beliefs and I'm not exposed to different opinions and different experiences, I'm never going to understand other people.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So the intention behind Taboo Talk is to bring all of those, whatever you want to call it, polarizations, differences in opinion, and just sit together and work through it and just have conversation. And we strongly believe in conversation over consensus. We're not trying to convert anyone. We're not trying to change people's opinions about topics. We're just trying to talk about what's already going on and their lived experiences. It's not like a panel where we invite speakers or academics. This is about what have you experienced in your life and how can you help other people understand your experience. So some of the topics that we've covered, as I mentioned, we've talked about domestic violence. We have
a big one. Yeah.
A huge one.
Yeah. Especially with what happened recently. With
suicide, another huge one in Australia that I think a lot of people don't realize how, one of, if I'm correct, I haven't checked the stats in the last year, but the number one cause of death for teenagers in Australia is suicide. And for men between a certain age, middle-aged men, that's alarming.
For sure, yeah.
And these are things that are not talked about. And so
with that, just quickly, what's some of the say the ideas that come up that even why this is even happening? Like in your talks, has anyone talked about where it stems from, this suicide thing with the youth and stuff like that?
Yeah, look, I think the topic around suicide was actually asking the question of why do we have these alarming rates? And a lot of people can only speculate. Unfortunately, it's really difficult to measure.
Concrete,
yeah. In my experience, I worked in suicide intervention for an online organization for a year, and I got a deep dive into the mind of someone who is currently considering taking their lives. And I can tell you people are feeling isolated. They feel that there is no other or no better option. It's not because they want to take their life. It's because they don't actually feel that the other options are great. People are in a lot of pain.
For sure.
They're not being seen. They're not able to be who they truly are. They're disconnected. Loneliness is one of the biggest epidemics just taking over. So it's actually it's not so hard to see how that can evolve. And one of the biggest misconceptions about suicide is that talking about it can lead someone to do it, when actually talking about suicide is one of the preventative factors of someone engaging or having suicidal behaviors. So,
but for you, doesn't that play a mental thing on yourself when you're dealing with those stories? And how did you deal with that, like trying to get out of it?
Trying to get out of it? You mean out of the...
Like just that thought, like diving into those stories, obviously I take a mental toll.
It's a good question.
How do you do it, like in your times when you're sitting down alone? And because for me, I take things home with me when I hear people's stories. Even now, like last week I had a really intense story with a ex-bikie, and it took me a long time to go to sleep this week because just hearing the stories that he's been through. I could imagine going through people with death. How do you deal with...
Look, vicarious trauma is something that we expect in our field as social workers. So we're trained in, boundary setting, and self-care is really important. And, self-care is one of those words that's just thrown around now.
Yeah, exactly,
But essentially you need to be reflective. You need to see where things are starting to cross the line. And to be honest, for me, that role was quite full on, and it took me a long time to emotionally recover from it, because it's not so much just about the individual stories. What can sometimes happen is it starts to paint a really dark picture of humanity. So,
and you think everyone's falling.
You know what? I'm very, very grateful that that's not something that has shifted. I still have a very optimistic view of humanity. I don't know how. People ask me this question all the time. You've seen the worst of people, but I've also seen the best of people.
There you go.
And I see people's true potential, and that's why I believe in Taboo Talk, because it helps strip away all those other things that sometimes we need to put up these walls and walls and walls and boundaries. And it's heavy,
Yeah, man. This subject, especially like even hearing about suicide, but this is me as a person. Like I'm really like sensitive to those sort of things, like people's lives and struggling.
Self-care is important.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that I want, like ask the guests, like you got to take care of yourself, and how do you do that, and how do you go through the mental challenges and stuff like that?
Look, I use travel. Travel is my probably number one way. For me, it's not about escaping. It's about being contemplative. I love being in nature. I love going to places.
Rejuvenating and stuff.
Yeah,
100%,
just seeing nature, seeing green trees and
even
water.
The beach here in the water splash, all that. That's beautiful. Yeah.
And spending time with children.
Oh yeah, that's another one.
And animals. They're innocent. They're untouched.
I've seen your Instagram with the little babies all the time.
Always with babies. Yeah.
No, that's good. But the one thing I just want to say until we end up, we've got 5 minutes.
Oh wow. Okay.
See how fast I went.
Yeah.
The best thing that you've done was the logo, the elephant. Why is, like, maybe to you, but for me looking outside in, it's just because elephants are so rememberable, family orientated, and the elephant mothers are very nurturing, and it suits you so well. You know what I mean? What made you come up with that logo?
Yeah, I can't take credit for the logo. The logo was designed by Chris Solfa. Shout out to Chris.
Shout out Chris.
And the concept was essentially elephant in the room.
Ah, okay.
And the T is a tusk. I don't know if you picked up on all the intricacies. And it's essentially about, what elephants represent in terms of wisdom, and that they're a herd. They're always together,
And they're always talking. And
and they're very, that's why we have the whole saying of the elephant in the room, because it's something that's so big that we just constantly ignore. And so it's really about trying to address that elephant in the room.
And the funny thing is, when your elephant are so placid though, so like people see the elephant in the room and they get scared of it, and not knowing them until you confront it. It's not as bad as you think it is, or it's not as hard to talk about, and if other people around you are talking about. That's beautiful, man. I think we've got to finish off at that. I really want to have you in again, so I'm going to set up in the future for something. Hopefully you can stay for this next interview that we have next, and I'll talk to you off the air. Let's see how it happens. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to play one more song. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you, Eddie. It was a pleasure.
You said tomorrow's postponed, you're saying?
Yeah, so we've been postponed till the 16th of March.
Okay. Maybe I can make that one, so I'll come down.
That would be great. Studio Blueprint, and the details are on our Facebook and Instagram page.
And Instagram is at
taboo_talk, and Facebook is Taboo Talk Society. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Radio Skid Row. Stay tuned, because I've got Anthony next from No Garlic, No Onions, a food blog.
Love it.
So we'll talk to him. Stay tuned. I'm going to play some music and we'll get him on the air. This Radio Skid Row 88.9. You're listening to Good Smoke.